The lawyer's hand turned the combination dial on the brushed steel safe, each metallic click slicing through the heavy silence of the office. Across the polished mahogany table, Maya sat still, her eyes locked on the man beside her. Uncle Richard's confident smirk, so steady for weeks, had started to crack, freezing into something thin and nervous. The safe door opened with a low, grinding groan, air hissing out as if the truth itself had been trapped inside. Inside sat a single leather portfolio, worn at the edges, stamped with her father's gold initials. Richard's fingers tapped the table once, twice, then stopped. Maya's breath came sharp and shallow, her knuckles white against the chair arms, not from fear but from fury she'd kept buried too long. What waited inside that folder would crush 6 weeks of lies he built while she buried her father. Have you ever watched someone you trusted turn into a stranger the moment money got involved? It's the kind of shift that leaves you cold, seeing greed wipe away years of love in seconds. Family can surprise you, but not always in the way you hope. If stories like this hit close to home, go ahead and like the video, subscribe for more true-life betrayals where justice always finds its way, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next twist. Because what came out of that safe didn't just expose a lie, it rewrote everything that came after. Maya Chen had always believed that order could hold chaos together. At 29, she worked as a commercial architect in Portland, specializing in restoring old buildings that most people had stopped noticing. Her desk at the firm was spotless, drawers labeled, files color-coded, every pen capped and lined perfectly. She was the kind of person who caught mistakes no one else saw. A wall measured 2 millimeters off, a window frame slightly misaligned, and quietly fixed them before anyone else noticed. Her co-workers called her the anchor, half-jokingly, because she never seemed to lose her calm. Even when deadlines pressed hard, outside work, her life was simple and steady. She rented a modest one-bedroom apartment near the waterfront and saved every extra dollar toward a down payment on her first house. 3 months earlier, she'd ended a quiet, mutual relationship with someone kind but not quite right. It wasn't heartbreak, just an acceptance that some things don't fit no matter how much care you give them. What grounded her wasn't romance. It was her father, James Chen, and the traditions they kept alive together. Every Sunday without fail for 17 years, she met him for dim sum. Rain or shine, they sat by the window of the same small restaurant, ordering the same dishes they always shared. Shrimp dumplings, turnip cake, tea served too hot. He'd talk about his workshop, and she'd talk about her projects. It was a ritual that connected them more deeply than words ever could. James Chen had come to the US at 19 with $200 and a duffel bag. He built his furniture business from the ground up, hand carving, sanding, and shaping each piece with quiet patience. When Maya's mother died of a stroke when Maya was 12, he didn't talk much about grief. Instead, he filled their days with the hum of saws, the smell of cedar shavings, and the soft music from a classical radio station that played in the workshop. Over the years, Maya's drawings, buildings, chairs, sketches of their home covered a corkboard above his workbench. He always said, "Wood tells a story, but you have to listen close." Her uncle, Richard, never listened. He was James's younger brother, a man who moved from job to job, always chasing the next big opportunity. He had borrowed money from James over and over, thousands at a time, with promises to repay that never came true. 20 years ago, James finally fired him after discovering Richard had mishandled client deposits at the furniture shop. That moment broke the family apart in ways no one wanted to admit. Richard never forgave the humiliation. Richard's wife, Linda, rarely spoke in family gatherings, her eyes always somewhere else. Their son, Derek, 25, still lived at home and hadn't worked in nearly 2 years. The extended family, scattered across California and Washington, kept polite distance, aware that peace between the brothers never truly returned. Still, Maya tried to believe people could change. When Richard started visiting her father again during his illness, she saw it as healing, not warning. 8 months ago, everything shifted. The diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, came like a hammer. James took it with his usual calm, but Maya saw the exhaustion in his eyes. He was given 6 to 12 months. True to who he was, he became methodical about every detail of his life. He sold unused tools, paid off debts, labelled files, and, 6 months before his passing, met with their longtime lawyer, Thomas Brennan, to update his will. Maya was there sitting beside him when he signed it. She remembered the weight of his hand, steady and sure. The document was clear. Everything, his house, business assets, savings and insurance, would go to her. "You'll know what to do with it," he had said softly. What she didn't notice were the small intrusions that followed. Richard began asking about legal paperwork, offering to help manage things so Maya could focus on her dad. He volunteered for solo shifts at the house near the end, insisting that she rest while he stayed overnight. She had taken it as kindness. She didn't know then that he was quietly positioning himself, weaving himself into places he didn't belong. 2 weeks ago, James passed away peacefully at home. Maya sat beside him, holding his hand as he took his final breath. His last words were quiet but clear. "You have everything you need. Don't let anyone tell you different." 3 days ago, they buried him under a grey autumn sky. The rain came down steady, soaking the ground around the headstone. The air smelled like wet earth and incense. Richard's eulogy was polished, his voice breaking in practiced places. He spoke about family unity and James's wish for everyone to be supported. Afterward, he hugged Maya tight, his breath warm against her ear. "Don't worry," he whispered. "We'll handle the estate details together." At that moment, Maya felt a flicker of comfort. She was tired, grateful to have family beside her. The world had gone quiet after weeks of pain and caregiving. She believed the hard part was over, that the documents were clear, that everything her father built was safe. She didn't yet know that the real battle hadn't even begun. 4 days after the funeral, Maya's phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. The man on the line introduced himself as Marcus Hoffman, attorney for estate executor Richard Chen. His tone was flat, professional, but the title hit her wrong. Executor. Her father had made her the sole heir. There was no executor but her. Hoffman said he needed to meet to finalize documentation. The words felt rehearsed. That afternoon, Maya drove across town to the address he gave. It wasn't the kind of office she expected. No downtown skyline, no polished glass. Instead, it sat between a nail salon and a payday loan shop. The sign above the door slightly tilted. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer ink. Cheap chairs lined the walls. Motivational posters about integrity in business hung crookedly behind a laminate desk. When Maya walked in, she froze. Richard was already there. So were Linda and Derek, sitting together as if waiting for a performance to start. Richard smiled, a calm, confident smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Glad you came," he said. Hoffman gestured for her to sit, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. "This," he said, "is your father's revised will." Maya stared at the date. 3 months prior. Her name was there, but not as she remembered. The new terms gave Richard the house, Derek the business equipment, and left Maya the remainder in trust, until she turned 35. She read the page again and again. Her father's signature looked right, same curve of the J, same firm underline, but something about it was too smooth, too clean. "This makes no sense," she finally said, her voice trembling but steady. "Dad and I went to Thomas Brennan's office 6 months ago. I watched him sign the actual will. I saw it." Richard leaned back, hands folded. "Maya," he said softly, "Dad changed his mind. He talked to me about it. He wanted fairness. Family shares." Hoffman nodded, his tone clipped. "The signature has been verified. Witnesses were present. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Derek Chen. This constitutes the valid will. Maya placed the document down slowly, her fingers shaking. I'd like to see the original, she said. Hoffman replied, It's secured for legal protection. Richard's smirk widened. You have 48 hours to vacate the property. We'll handle the estate transfer after. The ticking clock on the wall grew louder. The room felt smaller. Derek smirked, his fingers drumming the table. Linda stared down at her lap, silent. Maya gathered her bag, nodded once, and left, each step heavier than the last. The next days blurred into a pattern of confusion and disbelief. Richard called her constantly, leaving voicemails full of soft threats disguised as concern. We're family, Maya, he said. We support each other. Don't let money divide us. When she ignored him, he showed up at her apartment, uninvited, Derek in tow. You weren't answering, he said, holding a box of takeout. We were worried you were alone too much. He used her father's memory like a weapon. Dad wouldn't want this fighting, he said. You're thinking emotionally. You're grieving. Linda texted that night. Richard is just honoring your dad's wishes. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Maya tried to reason with herself. Could she have missed something? Could her father have changed his mind without telling her? She searched through her files, medical records, receipts, Brennan's business card, trying to find something that proved she wasn't losing touch with reality. But the more she looked, the messier everything became. Her apartment filled with half-open folders, coffee mugs, and the glow of her laptop as she stayed up late researching estate law she didn't fully understand. Then came the invasion. She drove to her father's house one afternoon and found Richard already inside, his old key turning easily in the lock. He was bent over her father's desk, drawers open. Just organizing Dad's papers, he said, when she demanded to know what he was doing. Derek was in the workshop, snapping pictures of the tools and furniture. Insurance records, he said with a grin. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived from Hoffman, legal jargon threatening eviction within 10 days. She called, demanding explanation, but he only said, It's standard procedure. The executor controls the property. When she returned the next day, her key no longer fit. Richard had changed the locks. A text followed. Had to secure the property. Estate assets need protection from unauthorized access. Maya stood on the porch, heart pounding. The house that had smelled of cedar and oil now reeked faintly of cologne. Her childhood bedroom curtains were gone. The workbench her father built was hidden behind a padlock. Then came the ultimatum. Another letter from Hoffman, this time threatening that if she contested the will, they'd countersue for frivolous litigation and take legal fees from her share. Richard called that night, his tone sharp. Dad gave you everything your whole life. It's someone else's turn now. Sign the acknowledgement or walk away with nothing. The next morning, Derek posted a photo of himself in the living room captioned, Finally getting what we deserve. Linda's voicemail followed soon after. Just sign, Maya, she said, voice shaking. You can't win this. It's not worth destroying what's left of the family. When an appraiser's notice arrived announcing the sale of the workshop equipment, something inside Maya cracked. She hadn't eaten properly in days, her clothes hung looser. Her hands trembled when she tried to draft plans at work. Her supervisor pulled her aside. You need rest, he said gently. But Maya couldn't rest, not while everything her father built was being stripped away piece by piece. By Wednesday night, 2 days before the deadline, her apartment looked like a storm had passed through. Papers covered the floor. A half-eaten meal sat untouched, the rain outside tapping softly against the window. Her phone buzzed. 14 missed calls from Richard. She turned it face down. She sat cross-legged on the carpet, holding a photograph from last Christmas. Her father laughing, flour dusting his apron, the workshop glowing behind him. Dad wouldn't do this, she whispered. He promised. She picked up Brennan's business card again. The address matched her memory, the same office where she'd watched her father sign the real will. Her father's words came back to her like an echo. Paper remembers when people forget, Maya. Always verify sources. Her eyes dropped to the revised will. The date read 3 months ago, but she remembered clearly that during that time her father's hands shook so badly he could barely hold a fork. She dug through a folder and found medical records, neuropathy caused by chemo. She compared the writing samples she'd kept for reference on a project she'd made for him. His handwriting then had been jagged and uneven. The signature on the new will was smooth, perfect, impossible. Maya began listing the inconsistencies out loud like solving an equation. Linda and Derek were listed as witnesses, but the hospice visitor log showed neither visited during that month. Hoffman's law firm wasn't in any of her father's files. The will's layout was generic, not Brennan's usual format. For the first time in weeks, her mind cleared. The architect in her, the one who saw hidden flaws in blueprints, took over. She started documenting everything: notes, copies, photos. She showered, dressed in clean clothes, and tied her hair back. Tomorrow she would call Thomas Brennan. She would get the truth, piece by piece, the way her father had taught her, by checking every line and every claim until the structure held. I knew something they didn't. Her voice steadies in narration. Dad taught me to verify every detail, every measurement, every claim. And they just handed me a document riddled with mistakes. Drop a like if you think family who exploit grief deserve what's coming. The next call I made flipped everything. By Thursday morning at 9, Maya was ready. Her hands still shook a little, but her voice was steady when she called Thomas Brennan's office. The moment she explained what had happened, there was silence on the other end. Then Brennan's calm but sharp reply. Richard presented what? That's impossible. I have James's original will right here in my vault. The one signed 6 months ago, witnessed by my staff. You're the sole beneficiary of the entire estate. The air left Maya's lungs. For the first time in weeks, the ground beneath her felt solid. Brennan asked her to email the forged document for review. Within an hour, he called back, his voice low and certain. This fake came from a generic template anyone can download online. The signature is traced, but the ink pressure's all wrong. And those witnesses, your uncle's wife and son, that alone makes it invalid. Beneficiaries can't legally witness a will. He wasn't just skeptical, he was furious. Brennan had known James for 15 years. He described him as meticulous, the kind of man who signed every page in triplicate. Then Brennan dropped another piece of evidence. Phone logs from his office. Your uncle called here 7 times after your father died, trying to get a copy of the will. We refused every time. The last attempt was 2 days after the funeral. When Maya sent over her father's medical records, the picture became even clearer. The date on the forged will lined up with a period when James's hands trembled so badly from nerve damage that even holding a pen was difficult. He couldn't have written this, Brennan said flatly. We can prove it. Together they built the timeline. Richard must have forged the new will right after the funeral, using Hoffman, a lawyer with prior ethics complaints, to file it and pressure Maya into surrendering. Brennan promised to take the case pro bono, both out of loyalty to James and because, as he put it, no one steals from a man like your father. By that afternoon, Brennan had filed an emergency injunction blocking all estate transfers. He contacted the district attorney's office to report the forgery and hired a forensic handwriting expert to prepare a sworn statement comparing both documents. Finally, he set a formal will reading for Friday at 2 p.m., the exact day Richard had chosen for his final ultimatum. That night, Maya ate her first full meal in days. She slept 6 hours straight. The next morning she put on her father's old watch, packed his leather portfolio under her arm, and met a locksmith and police escort at the house to restore her access. When she walked into Brennan's office later that day, the same mahogany table waiting, her steps were calm, her shoulders back, and her eyes clear. The fear that had followed her for weeks was gone, replaced with something sharper. It was the look of someone who finally had the truth on her side. The next day, at exactly 2 in the afternoon, the conference room in Brennan's downtown office was set for what looked more like a courtroom than a meeting. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in soft autumn light that stretched across the polished mahogany table. On the sideboard sat a tray of untouched coffee cups. A small recorder blinked red beside a stenography machine. The air conditioner hummed quietly, the only sound until the elevator doors opened. Richard walked in first, wearing a dark suit that looked too sharp for him, holding his briefcase like a weapon. Hoffman followed close behind, papers in hand, his face pale but stiff. Derek trailed them, nervous but trying to appear confident. Linda entered last, eyes swollen, sitting as far from her husband as the table allowed. Maya was already there, seated beside Brennan. Her father's leather portfolio rested in front of her, her hands steady over it. Richard forced a smile. "Finally ready to be reasonable?" he said. "Good. We can finalize this today." Brennan didn't flinch. "Everyone's present," he said evenly. "Let's begin the formal reading of James Chen's last will and testament." Richard frowned. "We already handled that with my attorney." "The authentic will, Mr. Chen," Brennan interrupted, his tone slicing through the room. "Executed 6 months ago, right here in this office." The words hit like a hammer. Richard's confident smirk faltered, Hoffman shifted uncomfortably, and Derek's grin disappeared altogether. Brennan opened a blue-backed folder and slid the first document forward. "This," he said, "is the original will. Signed, witnessed, and notarized under my supervision." Every signature line carried stamps and initials from his staff. The text left no confusion. The entirety of James Chen's estate is left to his daughter, Maya Chen. Richard tried to recover. "That's outdated," he said. "Dad revised it with Mr. Hoffman months later." Brennan placed another sheet on the table, a printed phone log. "You made 7 calls to my office after your brother's death, requesting a copy of this document. We refused every time. You knew this version existed, and that it named Maya as the sole heir." Richard's face reddened. "I was helping organize things. Someone had to take responsibility." Brennan continued as though he hadn't spoken. He handed out the next paper, a sworn affidavit from a forensic handwriting expert. "The signature on your so-called revised will was traced. The ink pressure is wrong, the pen used is different, and the strokes are too smooth to belong to someone suffering late-stage neuropathy. James Chen's true signature from 6 months ago shows tremors consistent with his condition. This one is a forgery." Hoffman's complexion drained to grey. Derek looked down at the table. Brennan didn't stop. He showed the next file, Maya's father's medical records, confirming his advanced hand tremors 3 months before the forged will's date. He couldn't even hold a pen steadily, let alone produce that signature. Richard's chair screeched back as he stood. "This is absurd! Linda and Derek saw him sign." "Interested beneficiaries cannot witness a will under state law," Brennan replied calmly. "That makes your document invalid even if it weren't forged." The room went dead silent. Then Linda's voice broke it. "I never saw James sign anything," she said softly. "Richard brought the papers home. He told me to sign where it said witness. I didn't read it." Richard turned on her, voice rising. "You don't know what you're talking about." Brennan ignored him and placed the final sheet on the table. "Forensic analysis of the digital file's metadata. The forged will was created on your home computer, Mr. Chen, 4 days after your brother's death." Hoffman pushed back his chair. "I'm withdrawing from representation effective immediately." Derek looked pale. "Dad, you said it was legal. You said Grandpa wanted this." Richard's control finally snapped. "He owed me," he shouted. "He humiliated me 20 years ago and built his perfect life while I was left with nothing. This was fair." Brennan stood, his voice calm and firm. "Mr. Chen, I've already submitted all of this to the district attorney's office. Will forgery is a Class C felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison and heavy fines." The conference room door opened. 2 detectives stepped in quietly. One read Richard his rights, while the other took him by the arm and pulled his hands behind his back. Richard shouted about betrayal, about injustice, about how family had turned on him, but no one responded. Derek stood frozen until one of the detectives turned to him. "Derek Chen." The young man nodded weakly as cuffs clicked around his wrists. He was charged as an accessory for signing the false witness statement. Linda covered her face and began to cry. "I'm sorry, Maya," she whispered. "I should have questioned it. I should have stopped him." Brennan spoke gently. "You've cooperated. You won't face charges." Hoffman hurried from the room without a word and aware that the state bar would soon be reviewing his license for filing fraudulent documents. Within a week, the full fallout began. Richard and Derek were both charged with forgery, fraud, and attempted grand theft. Their names hit the local papers, their faces broadcast on evening news. The extended family turned on them completely. Richard's employer terminated him. Derek's social accounts vanished overnight. Maya received a restraining order for protection and, soon after, the official court confirmation that she was, and always had been, the sole heir of her father's estate. She changed the locks again, this time for good. The workshop door opened once more, the smell of cedar and oil returning like an old friend. She didn't gloat. She didn't even smile. She just stood there quietly, breathing in the space her father had built with his own hands, knowing that the truth, documented, signed, and proven, had finally spoken louder than every lie. In the weeks that followed, life began to find its rhythm again. Maya stayed in her father's house, keeping things simple. She learned how to handle the tools he'd once used with such ease, the hum of the sander, the weight of the wood, the calm patience it required. On quiet afternoons, she still worked on her museum restoration project, finding comfort in bringing old things back to life, just like he had. The workshop smelled like cedar and oil again, and the old classical station played softly from the radio, just as it always had. Her father's sketches hung beside her own, old and new stories sharing the same wall. She thought often about what was lost, the idea that family always means loyalty, the easy trust she once gave without question. But what she gained mattered more. She learned that protecting what someone built with honesty is not selfish, it's respect. Grief had made her vulnerable, but not powerless. Her father's final gift wasn't the estate. It was the lesson that truth survives when you're willing to stand for it. "Dad built everything with his hands and his integrity," she said quietly one evening. "The will was just paper. The real inheritance was learning what to protect. And why. What matters more, pretending everything is fine with family who betrayed you, or standing up for the person who always had your back? Many people find out the hard way that love changes when money appears. If that's ever happened to you, share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Subscribe for more real stories where the truth wins in the end. Hit like if you believe protecting what's right is more important than staying silent to keep the peace.